All right. Well, welcome everybody to First Mondays with the ASQ. We are the Arianna String Quartet. I want to first introduce everybody in the quartet. John Magrosso and Julia Sakharova are violinists. Joanna Mendoza, viola, and I'm Kurt Baldwin. For many of you, probably, hopefully, you've come to First Mondays with the ASQ, and we wanted first off just to tell you how much we miss all of you. It's been a very trying time for all of us, and as musicians who thrive on seeing people and communicating with people and sharing what we do with people, it's been a very odd time. We're very happy that we can be back working with each other safely and carefully, but we miss all of you. For anybody who's new to this evening, just want to tell you what the objective is here. The idea behind First Mondays is to give us a chance to have a more informal experience with music, oftentimes with an interdisciplinary angle. You can't get more informal than us playing from Joanna's house. This is the way chamber music ultimately should be. But the idea is that we're going to take a deep dive tonight into one of our favorite quartets, and please feel free to text or send questions if you have them into the chat, and our wonderful colleagues at KWMU will make sure they text them to us, and we'll address those. The focus tonight is on one of the most unusual pieces in the quartet repertoire, and one that we've loved playing and we've recorded as well. The second quartet of Leos Janacek called Intimate Letters. I'll turn it over to Joanna, and she can tell you a little more about the piece as we start our talk.
Sure. This quartet is nicknamed Intimate Letters, or named Intimate Letters, because it was inspired by the over 700 love letters written by Leos Janacek. Actually, his love letters between him and Kamila Staslova, with whom he had an obsessive love affair, or an obsessive infatuation, and he was obsessed. She was not. He was 61. She was 25. They were both married. This was a very difficult, complicated relationship, but he was absolutely in love with her. And imagine 700 letters. And they met in 1917. And for the remaining 11 years of his life, he continued to write for her, about her, inspired by her. And this is really, really dedicated to her. This piece, in fact, he highlights the use of the viola. The viola has such a prominent role. In fact, it was the music, the viola represents Kamila. And originally he had written this piece for an instrument called viola d'amore, the viola of love. And which
is there any other kind?
Right, exactly. Which was a Baroque era instrument, which had 6 or 7 strings, and then also these sympathetic strings, which went through the scroll and through the back side of the fingerboard, and what would happen is those sympathetic strings would ring and fill out the harmonies as the other strings were played, and it produced a very unusual kind of silvery tone, and I think between the sound of it, but also the name of the instrument, he was really wanting to use that instrument. He used it also in other pieces that he wrote in the last years of his life. So it is a really beautiful, unusual instrument. Maybe we can talk a little bit about why we were drawn to.
And I think he decided at the end to use, just because it didn't fit maybe the quartet, right? But
Right. It was just the timbre of it. The sound of it was just impractical. It's too soft, actually, of an instrument to interact with. Right, and to be heard.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we chose this piece, for me personally, we have this series also called Home with the ASQ. And for those of you who might have tuned in a couple of weeks ago,
We're still sorry about
we had a little bit of a
Yeah.
fiasco, but we promise don't give up on us. We're here. And so the reason we chose this piece, this was one of the first pieces I played with the Arianna Quartet, and it's been a few years ago, and I'll never forget kind of how that happened. It was during a summer festival, and there were like 6 or 7 new pieces for me, and this was one of them. And I jumped in and I said, yes, I'll play. And little did I know, what was in front of me. But ever since that time, I wanted to return to this piece because it just offers so many great possibilities for actually playing the instrument and also being in a quartet. Second violin sometimes often, people think of in the quartet as a kind of a lesser role, but, not for me, of course. With different repertoire, composers have different functions for the instruments. And in this piece, Janacek really highlights the interaction between violins. You could hear later in each movement how violins are interjecting between voices or go in and out. And second violin really highlights that aspect. So that was one of the also reasons why I wanted to play it again, because it just gives a bigger range for the instrument that you can kind of, on top of the other things that,
Yeah, and as you're thinking about instrumental classical music and our specialty is string quartets, there's always something that sets a piece apart. I mean, that's something we believe in, that every piece is special. Every piece was written for a reason, inspired by something. What's unusual, and we'll take you through kind of a sort of a buffet of the we haven't had dinner yet. A buffet of the melodies and some of the construction, but I think as we've been chatting in rehearsal, one of the things we marvel at is because this music is so driven by Janacek's psychology and emotion and obsession, there are really no compositional rules that he adheres to. So we're pushed to do things with our instruments with special effects and rhythms and trills and jumping around the instrument that make the music feel very unpredictable.
Yeah, Janacek's ideas of melody or ideas of texture are so unique, and it makes it just a real joy to play, but also a nightmare to learn. The first time when we were playing this, just because the parts look so different than any other piece that we've played, and you just can't really get a sense of the flow of them from the way your part or even the score looks. Janacek had a different approach to melody that was very much speech-based rather than singing-based. So when someone would come up to talk with him, he would just often be distracted by the melody of the speech of the person. And he saw so much, he gained so much insight, so much emotional insight into the person by the melodies that they chose in their sentences. So he amassed a huge collection of what he called speech melodies. So you'll hear that a lot of the music sounds kind of fragmented, kind of abrupt. It's almost like the rhythms of speech, but also the melodies from speech. And I think the other thing that's fascinating about this piece as far as the texture and how it was hard for us to learn is just the amount of sudden changes from one texture to the next. So many tempo changes, so many rhythmic changes, and also the way the quartet is used as really one voice. We're really commenting on and always contributing to what each other is doing.
I think that suddenness that you're talking about is that emotional part, right? Because it's not while it's called intimate letters, it's not a story in a programmatic way,
It's not
but
contoured.
it's right, exactly. And one thing, it doesn't feel like there are these very tidy transitions from one idea to the next, but it's kind of jarring almost.
And abrupt.
And
Yeah.
abrupt. And so his music is often described as kind of like an emotional drama, so if it feels really kind of abrupt and a little bit schizophrenic, right?
Strange.
Right,
Yes.
then know that's like
Normal.
that's normal, right?
Right.
We gotta check that's normal.
We have a famous colleague, I think you mentioned that, he even said that for this piece, notes don't matter, but just the notes don't even matter because it's so emotional that the music what matters, but not the notes.
It's very strange that way. It's almost like a dreamscape too, where you have this thing happens and then this completely different thing will happen and then something else wild will happen, and yet it does somehow have its own sort of dream logic it takes you through.
So one of the most poignant things that happens right at the beginning is the introduction of Camilla, and so we want Joanna to demonstrate.
Right. I mean, there's I think that idea that it sounds kind of like dreamlike. I think this kind of goes in and out of dreamlike. This when the violins come in at the beginning, it's a very kind of masculine or very real, earthy kind of theme.
Statement, yeah.
And then this melody that the viola has, and that gets reimagined throughout the whole piece, all of the movements, it's supposed to sound like he's like stopping dead in his tracks, and he's just mesmerized by her beauty and the strangeness of seeing something new and beautiful.
It's not your connection that you think, oh, what happened with the sound? Janacek marks to play ponticello, which means right on the bridge. So to produce that kind of metallic and cold sound, it's interesting that he chose that color for the first time of seeing it.
Right.
So it's something that's just really.
It's kind
So
of mysterious
arresting.
or
So
arresting,
arresting.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So then another sort of element stitched into the construction is we have these beautiful melodies, but then there are underlying rhythms that are these ostinatos that are, we see them as sort of his obsession and a relentlessness and single-mindedness. And so we're going to play a section of this so you can hear the beauty juxtaposed against this sort of obsessive quality.
Yeah, so you'll hear this obsessive quality. It starts off in the cello, but play a little, just put that. Right, these repeating sort of faster figures, and they can become really amazingly frenetic as it goes. And sometimes the melodies are very slow moving, but at the same time you have this charge of this obsession. So we'll play a section of this.
6
Up to the after 9. Wait. some idea of just the range emotionally, and just the suddenness too of these abrupt changes you'll really hear as we go through the movement.
So here's the first movement of Janacek's Intimate Letters. I love about that playing that is it's different every time. It's one of those movements as a player that every time we play it, their timing is different, the textures feel different, it has a life of its own.
And that usually that is, as to me, a trademark of a masterpiece,
That's
because the composer created such amazing opportunities every time.
Yeah.
And it takes, one thing we've also found, one of the reasons we love this piece and we love to travel with it when we go out of town and play concerts is that it takes over any space that you play in, and that's another sign of a great piece.
It's bigger than
Yeah, I mean, you really hear, I mean, it's so ecstatic, right? I mean, it just gets to like a complete gamut of emotion. And I just, every piece that we play, I feel it like plays differently, or the way that it looks is very different from the way that it feels when we play. And this one especially, right? I mean, it's like, it's kind of like we can never overdo it because it's like there's almost like never enough emotion.
That's right.
Yeah, I think the way Janacek has also written it to be the way he composed freedom into it by giving the elasticity, this opportunity for elasticity. I think that's one thing as a quartet we're always looking for, these opportunities where the music can really leave the page, where it doesn't have to have this certain mathematical relationship to the rhythm, that it can really be much more imagined and much freer. And this piece gives us such wonderful opportunities for this as well.
So the second movement is actually a depiction of the town where they met and supposedly their first kiss, which according to Janacek's diaries occurred on August 26, 1927.
At 4:36.
Yeah, that's
Right, exactly. I don't know, we don't know if this was like part of the dream or,
Well,
right.
Right.
The exact date.
In his diary, he wrote, "Today I wrote in musical notes my sweetest desire. I struggle with it. It prevails. You are giving birth. What would be the destiny of that newborn son? Would it be ours? Just as you are, laughing with tears in your eyes. That is how it sounds." So, I mean, there is a real lullaby element to this theme at the beginning, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think here also, Janacek didn't really like melodies as in their conventional way, and the way most composers would write a melody would be, something with a nice arch to it, and then something would be passed to another it would be commented, it would be developed throughout the movement. And here, really, we have the same sort of fragments, just again and again, as part of this obsessive quality of his, but also just it adds into that dream world of repetition. And one part of this theme in this movement, there's so much reaching up that's written into the theme. So you'll hear these ascending leaps of intervals, and that really just asking this question. It just keeps asking the question, I think, throughout this movement.
Let's play the first 12 bars and just demonstrate that.
Okay.
In this sense, he is very similar to Beethoven, who would take one little segment and just go with it. You think of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, da 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 da, that one little motive of 4 notes. Here, Janacek has pretty much 5 notes or 6 notes that he plays around with, and you hear this coming in different, dressed up differently. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, in different register, but pretty much that one motive makes up the whole movement.
Let's play two more examples of how he dresses that up. Let's play
Mhm.
a rehearsal 3
Oh,
first,
okay.
and then
Yeah.
then we can I
This
don't
is where that obsessive quality comes back in.
Right.
From the-
You'll notice that weird sound again coming
Right.
in.
play 3 to 5, and then
Mhm.
we'll stop at 5, and
Okay.
we'll play at 5.
Okay.
So just when you think it can't get more obsessive, then this happens.
Right.
Those are
Yeah.
just still those 6 notes.
It's just so over the top, and that's one of the things that makes it so fun to play, but also so challenging.
Mhm.
One of my favorite moments in this movement is if we could play the violin thing before 11, that
Yeah,
whatever,
the
eight
sort of
bars.
folky,
Yeah.
folky thing.
After all of this obsession, it's almost like we don't know exactly what it is, but there's a nostalgic sort of memory of something else, and it has a completely, to me it always sounds a little like kind of a dream in a salon or cafe or something like that.
Maybe they went for coffee.
Yeah.
How much do you want to play? Just up to 11?
Yeah, just for the sound of this.
Yeah. You know, maybe I mentioned this earlier, but Janacek went through a phase of going out into the countryside and looking for folk music, and just all of that quality we really hear in the kind of intervals that he uses, the kind of scales that he uses.
Oh, wait.
So you'll hear that throughout.
Yeah, there's one element here that's kind of new, and he introduces it here in this movement. I have it twice, and Joanna has it once, and it's this 6-tuplet figure, and it's actually, he's leaving one first note, so it's really 5 notes, but he marks it flotando, which means kind of by the fingerboard and at the tip, and very airy. So we don't, it's sort of like a dreamlike idea, and we don't even know what that could be. So that's at 10. Let's just do that.
Actually, that scale, that it's a very special scale because it doesn't have the certain grounding, the solidity that a Western scale would. That interval gives it that certain solidity, that gives it a certain identity. But this,
Doesn't lead anywhere.
it removes that sense of identity, and actually that same quality is used in a lot of films to give a sort of magical quality. In fact, in Sleeping Beauty, when you're looking at the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, you always hear that. Just to remove the structure of the world, and then you have this dream fantasy state.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the second movement of Janacek's intimate figures.
one thing that's interesting to me about this piece is that even with all of these elements that are so different from any other quartet, he still manages to make some concessions to tradition in the sense of having a sort of a first movement that's kind of an allegro fast movement, and the second movement is sort of a slow movement, and then to have a dance movement is the tradition, like a minuet for the third movement. And Janacek finds a way of here having a sort of a lullaby, waltzy kind of third movement that fits into that four movement standard form.
Yeah, and as we were discussing these movements, this one actually stands alone in that there are no other themes that come back from previous movements as he kind of plays around with that in the other two. Here it presents a new material, and in the middle of that movement, there's a huge climactic moment where it's almost as if he's just gone through all hell and back and is screaming out top of his lungs, help, or SOS. I can't do it, like with that desperation of that laugh. And it's so clear when that comes. It's still, every time you play it, it's shockingly shocking how
Yes.
Yeah, and according to his letters, this was, in his opinion, his favorite or best movement. He wrote, this will be the best movement so far now, if only the last would turn out well too. Writing this is like the worry I feel about you. He was always, she was always kind of out of his grasp. She knew it. I mean, he knew it, right? He knew that she was just unattainable. So I think that that was part of
Did you
it.
mention the age difference?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, he wrote, I am now writing the third of the love letters. I want to make it particularly joyful and then dissolve it into a vision like your image. How could I not be overjoyed remembering the times of being with you when I felt as though the earth was trembling under my feet?
Yeah.
I'd say he was pretty
Spin?
Yeah.
smitten.
I think we should.
Yeah.
Beyond smitten.
Okay.
And we're getting a little distortion, so if we could just take the edge off.
Ah.
the volume.
We'll get to
Of the
playing
playing.
louder.
Now
I
we'll
think
get
we're
to
playing
it,
louder.
Simon.
That's
than-
right.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody written with a question or anything?
Yeah, well, somebody just asked a question. There are a couple questions. One question came in that said, how did we discover this piece? And that's a great question, because it does sort of lie just outside the mainstream quartet repertoire, but certainly as string players and as quartet players, I mean, before we were actually quartet players, when we were just students, if you heard this piece as a student, or if you ever heard this piece, it was just kind of tattooed on your brain. You couldn't forget it, because you couldn't, if it's the kind of piece too, when you hear live in a bigger room, you've never heard these sounds and that kind of energy before. So I think we found it through our mentors and through just sort of the body of quartet repertoire. And
But it is now, I think.
now it's a fairly
standard, yeah.
mainstream piece.
It's also in movies, right? This was
not surprising.
right. In the Milan Kundera movies, like the
Unbearable Lightness of
right,
Being.
unbearable like
Yeah.
being.
So it's probably his first quartet, I can imagine.
There was also a comment from somebody who said that the third movement, there's a section that sounded similar to Phantom of the Opera, to them. And there's a mysticism.
Definitely.
There's a mysticism to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a real rustic quality to this last movement, which is really represents Camilla's kind of she was from the country, so this kind of peasant countryside dance sounds, and ironically, she had no interest in his music. Like, she was not, overtaken by his fame. I mean, at this point, he's a very well-known Czech composer, and she really couldn't care less.
What a pity.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, he didn't mind.
Yeah, that didn't stop.
Yeah.
And this movement, one of the enticing things about this last movement is how it begins. It's sort of rollicking and outdoorsy, but just as in keeping with the theme of these other or the sort of landscape of the other movements, there's an unpredictability in the movement, and it breaks down several times in the movement before the sort of drive to the end. And I don't know another piece that it almost combusts at the end.
Right.
And there are a set of trills, and you'll hear this a couple of times, first in Julia's part, and then later Joanna passing to John toward the end of the quartet, where there's this frenetic, whenever you add a trill onto a note, it becomes unstable. And when you put a series of them together,
And then when you also add some ponticello, which we have that weird sound going on throughout the quartet, it sounds really crazy.
Right, and when you have it, it's
Right.
really a cadenza. It's very free, and so it's really kind of this.
Yeah, it's almost like
crazy.
you should have not even put measures between them,
Right,
because it's just
exactly.
Right.
So enjoy this last movement. If you have any questions, type them in, and we'll play this last movement for you. And we so appreciate you all being here. And then before we break, we'll tell you a little bit about what we have coming up in the next couple months. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. We hope you enjoyed this tour through Janacek's second quartet, Intimate Letters. Next, we're looking forward to next month. We'll have information about our first Monday in April, and then in May as well. And then we will also be sending out information about our upcoming reattempts at home with the ASQ. Those dates are the 19th of March, the 16th of April, and the 7th of May. And we will continue to send out announcements about that. That's also posted on ariannaquartet.com, and you can get information there. If anybody has any questions for us about upcoming performances in St. Louis online, don't hesitate to email us. You can get there on the contact page of our website, and we look forward to seeing everybody in person. It feels like everything is going in the right direction right now, and thankfully in St. Louis, weather is going to get warm early, and we will be ready to play outdoors and take our show on the road. So
Yeah.
Expect us in your own.
thank you all.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks very much for joining us
And
tonight.
thanks to KWMU for their ongoing partnership. We feel so fortunate to have community partners like KWMU who bring interesting programming to all of us all the time, and we're very proud to be part of that family. So everybody stay well, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Be safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.